Hey everybody, welcome to Art 13131, and we are still in week 3. We're going to talk about assignment number 8 and 9 right here. Assignment number 8 is crumpled paper from life. So like I say before, whenever I say life, it means something real in front of you in life. So you're going to crumple a piece of paper. Printing paper works really well. Don't get one with lines on it or words. You want a blank piece of paper without lines or words. Crumple it up in your hand, both hands, and maybe pull it out slightly so it's not too much of a tight ball. You want to see the folds and crevices and all the shadow areas and light areas to be able to shade. So I would crumple it into a ball that's maybe the size of a baseball, and then maybe pull out just a little bit, not to make it flat. It's still going to be a ball shape, or relatively so, but maybe it's the more size in between a baseball and a grapefruit, so that you can see more folds. If it's too tight, it might not show as many folds. Now I'm going to show you some examples of student drawings, and you can determine the size of that from there. So the crumpled paper, let's show some examples of that. And as you can see, when you put your paper down on the table in front of you, you're going to be able to have a single light source from either a window or a lamp, not multiple light sources. I say this all the time, because you don't want two different light sources kind of messing up all the shadow areas. You want a cast shadow on one side, maybe possibly on a little bit on one other side, but you want all these dark and light areas in here, and that's going to be created by your single light source. Okay, so that's very important to have a single light source. Take a photo of this crumpled paper so that when I ask to see what you worked from, you're able to send that to me, because I want to compare your drawing with what you were looking at. Okay, so that's very important as well. Take a photo. And as you can see, there's shading that meets other shading. Maybe your background was lighter back here. If it's darker, then do that. Certainly the table will have a cast shadow on it. I think some of the other examples I have different shading on the surface of the table or the background, but I'm not sure about that. Let me see. But you'll notice all the darker areas in here and the lighter areas. You're going to see them if you look for them. And these are the dips and folds and crevices, creases, wrinkles in the crumpled paper. So basically you're going around and mapping out what those are and smoothly shading those in so that they're not scratchy marks. The paper is smooth where it is, where the little sections are. It's not scratchy. So don't make scratchy marks with the tip of your pencil. Use the side of your pencil in an overhand grip like you learned in the video for shading in week 2, or week 1 actually. It was assignment 2. And just notice where the darkest area is. Maybe put that in first, and then the lightest area just leave void of any tone. That's going to be as white as paper. But then you have all these midtones in between, the very darkest to the very lightest. That's going to be at least 7 different levels of tone, from dark, a little lighter, a little lighter, a little lighter, a little lighter. Pretty soon you're into the very light and the lightest. Okay? Don't draw lines to define all the sections and the border of your paper, because they're not really there. If you look at the paper, you won't see lines drawn on everything. It's just that shading meets other shading. Now, initially you can use a gesture drawing and kind of map out where these crevices are lightly with your pencil, very lightly, so you can either erase it or shade into it and it won't be visible. You're going to shade up to it and then that line will disappear. You don't want lines because that's not realism. That's not what's really there. There are no lines on the paper. No border lines. So there may be a few shading lines here and there. And then you also can erase out tone where you see lighter areas that you forgot to do, or maybe you just shaded that area and you didn't do them and you're going to leave them till later. Erase out tone where the lightest areas are, if you need to. And then go back and forth. Add a little tone, erase a little tone, add a little tone, erase a little tone, wherever that is. And then pretty soon your paper will start to take shape. Darkest area here, probably right there. And then a little dark, less dark here. Here, this area, right in here. Darker, a little less dark. Then you're getting into the very midtones in all this area here. And there's several. And don't be afraid to put them all in. This is what's going to create the shape of your paper and bring this paper to light. Now you want that great contrast. You want very, very light areas, very, very dark areas, and everything in between. If all your tones are very similar, it's going to look flat and it won't have any shape. So even though you may think something's lighter than it is, or this whole thing is light, you're going to have to add contrast to make it a stronger drawing. So wherever the darker tones are, make them pretty dark. Where the lighter are, make those very light, and then have all these levels in between, wherever it is. Here's another example. This is a little less smooth shading, but it's not necessarily scratchy. But there's a good cast shadow on the table. I think the other one had one too, right here. So the light's coming from the right side on this one. Shadow on the table is on the left. Same with this one. We have a lot of very dark areas here. You may have to emphasize these areas to make them a little darker to give you more contrast. It's the contrast that makes your subject matter pop off the page. If it's very light and similar in tone, it won't pop off the page. It won't have very good shape. It'll look more flat than not. You're trying to create a three-dimensional appearance on your two-dimensional plane. And that takes contrast of light and dark and everything in between, all the midtones. This is really intricate, this one. Very smooth shading. Erased out areas where they thought the tips of the paper, or the tips of the fold and crevices were lit up a little bit more. So right in here and right in here and here, they erased out or just left the tone out. And then just shaded all the other tones very meticulously, very carefully. This should take you, 2 to 3 hours or more to do. Okay. Cast shadow on the table. Looks a little strange because it looks kind of round right there, but I'll go with it. The drawing is very well done. It has enough contrast. It has enough shape. It looks three-dimensional. And that's what you're going for. Okay? Now this one's super cool. I don't know how they actually stood it up like that. They might have emphasized on this one. I'm not sure. But nonetheless, it's a very interesting drawing, and the paper looks really super cool the way it's kind of pulled out from the ball shape. These are more like, more of a tighter ball. I think I had another one. This one's kind of pulled out a little bit more, which you can do. Very dark areas in here and very light areas and a lot of contrast. This has a lot of shape. Cast shadow on the table. Cast shadows are not necessarily all completely black, because the light is going to play differently where more of the object is blocking the light and less of it where light is actually getting around and shining on your surface. It'll look more like this possibly. So really check that out when you're looking at your crumpled paper. You want to see dips and folds and be able to see inside them like this. Actually, when you pull it out slightly, it may be easier to draw than something like tight like this. That looks more like even it almost looks like a flower, like a rose or something like that. This one's a little more gooey looking, not so sharp on the edges, but it is a good drawing nonetheless. And this one's kind of in the middle of all that. It's still good, but this one's pretty phenomenal. Again, no lines. This is the shading that meets the background shading. Shading that meets that dark. Shading that meets the light. Here's a slight little line here because this was so light and the background was so light, they felt like they needed a line there. And it works for the most part. The other way to get around that is to be shading the background a little bit in this area that was darker than that, and maybe it gets a little lighter up here or a little darker around here. It's not bad to have maybe one or two lines like that if you really need to separate the background tone from the tone on the paper that's very, very light. But as you can see, they're not putting them in everywhere, so you don't really need it everywhere. I think that might be my last one. Nope, there's one more. Now I'll mention that this one's more scratchy looking, right? The shading is kind of scratchy and probably not accurate to what this crumpled paper actually looked like in the shading. So you really want to watch that. You really want to make the best representation of what you're looking at. And if it's smooth paper tones that are not scratchy like this, you see all the scratchy marks in here and scratchy here and scratchy there? You really don't want that. You want it to be smoother. And I mentioned smudging tools, which are like a roll of paper that they make. It's like very tightly rolled paper that has a tip on it. It's like a pencil made out of paper. That paper you can rub in here and smooth out all your graphite, which smooths out your shading marks. Now you can use a rag over your finger, or actually your own finger will smudge that, or a Q-tip will smudge it. Whatever means you come up with, they sell the smudging tools, and they may be a better option because they have different size of them, and they actually work really well. So, but smudging or smoothing like that really helps your tone, so it doesn't end up scratchy like this one. That's a cube. That's not it. Okay, so those are the examples. Pause the video where you need to back there and look at the examples. But you want your own subject matter. You want your own crumpled paper. Maybe pull it out slightly so you see more of the surfaces and the crevices. And then have a single light source. Don't draw lines around the whole thing at the end, bold lines. You can adjust your draw with thin, very, very light lines, and then erase them or use your shading to cover them up. Okay, let's talk about number 9, which is, it would be a homework assignment, but since you guys are online, you can do this all week and determine which one you're going to do on the weekend. This is a drawing from life that is any subject. So it's a still life drawing of any subject matter, any item you want to draw in front of you on a table surface. And you're going to do all the things you've learned. Have a single light source, use shading, use proportion, use your gesture drawing to map out how the proportion and how the sizes are before you shade. You're going to do that lightly before you shade. Then, once you've drawn this, drawing from life, some item you've chosen, not imagination. Don't use something from your imagination or memory because it's not going to be as accurate as something you're looking at. In this early stage of assignments, I want you to be looking at something for that. So draw that, and once you're done drawing it, on a separate page, or if you want to make room on the same page, go ahead. But the experiment, the exercise is to draw the same drawing with your eyes closed. So there'll be two drawings, right? One is the drawing of life. You're looking at it, you drew it, you took a long time to draw it. Now you have that in your memory. Close your eyes and draw it again without looking at it. And don't cheat, because it's not the outcome, it's the process that's important. The outcome of this second drawing is not important as much as the process. So you go through the process and you shade, you draw as best you can with not looking at it, okay? Just where you think it is. And do as much as you possibly can to really do a good job and put in everything you might remember. Even though it's going to come out wonky, I understand that. But don't look. And then open your eyes and look what you've done and send those drawings to me, either both on the same page or two separate drawings. That's fine. So that's the experiment, to draw it without your eyes open, with eyes closed, the same drawing you spent a long time drawing, but separate. Two different drawings, two separate drawings, on the same page or separate paper. That's the homework, or the number 9, okay? Okay. I don't know if I have a video for this. I didn't have for the plastic wrap in over your hand, but I did provide a drawing hands video, so that might help you initially when you're drawing hands, and how much shading there is, and how much you use your light source, what proportions you're drawing. It all shows that in the video. And maybe I can find something like that for crumple paper, but look for it and watch the videos before you attempt your assignments. Okay, so next week is week 4. And we're going to start talking about the midterm presentation there. It's not due till week 5, but in week 4 you'll start mapping that out and deciding what you're going to do for that. And I'll talk about that later. All right, have a good weekend, and we'll talk with you soon.